All right. Well,
Yep.
thanks again for everybody joining us here. We'll go ahead and begin. First things first, this is being recorded, so if you miss anything or you want to review this later or share it out afterward, we will have the recording. You are here for Rethinking Cybersecurity, 3 modernized strategies for layered cybersecurity. And of course, I'm here. I'm Sam Bourgeois. We're going to introduce ourselves in a second, but we're doing this presentation with one of our key technology partners, which is ArmorPoint. ArmorPoint kind of powers our SOC behind the scenes here at DioPath, in addition to some other tools that we use. And we wanted to invite them to have this conversation because they are experts on the matter of layered cybersecurity strategies. So, John, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to meet everyone. Thanks again for joining. So I'm John Crowley. I'm one of the senior account executives and partner development managers here with ArmorPoint. Actually, believe it or not, today is my 6-year mark at the organization. So really excited about that. What I do really on a day-to-day basis is I specialize in working with IT leaders and business partners to help organizations build and develop cybersecurity strategies and programs that really, drive growth to the business and overall protection. So really excited to be here with Sam, who's one of our most strategic partners at DioPath.
Thank you.
And then
Thanks,
Sam,
John.
you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm the director of cybersecurity services for DioPath. Prior to this role, I was at another managed service provider, and I have a background in virtual or fractional CISO, lots of operational leadership roles, everything from telco to IT, and really enjoy myself being at DioPath because we have recently kind of relaunched and kind of reevaluated the priority of security, not just in our organization, but how we approach security with our clientele as well. And so, working with partners like John and ArmorPoint, we've relaunched our DioGuard solution set recently, and part of that conversation, part of that effort to do so was really talking to clients, talking to our customers, talking to folks out there in the real world about the challenges that they face and about the things that they struggle with on a daily basis. And so often in conversation, when we're talking about, how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our organization? An analogy often comes up, and that's the castle. And so you probably heard the castle. It's the tired old analogy, the moat, the drawbridge, the towers. It's basically building a layered approach to security in which we build high towers, we have strong walls, we have moats to keep people out, and drawbridges to let just the right people come in. And so the problem with that, and I think everybody's probably aware there are issues with that. The problem with that is the castle's fixed, and it doesn't account for remote work, and it doesn't account for BYOD or the fact that what's inside the castle really needs to be protected, or who do we actually know is inside the castle? What about insider threats? All those kind of things that we can kind of poke holes in the analogy, and really it's time to kind of turn that castle on its head, to put it bluntly. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. I think at this point it's outdated. It's very much focused on perimeter security and watching around the security, but it takes away the focus of, well, what are we trying to protect, right? So why change? Well, first off, remote work, the rise of remote workforces have really blurred the lines of traditional network perimeter security and what is truly important to us. And so, yeah, through the presentation, we really plan to kind of flip the castle on its head a little bit. And at the end, we might try to put it back together, but we'll try to have some fun with this as we go through it. And so, in the new age, of cybersecurity, what we really want to look at is a risk-based approach, right? Understanding what is the risk to the business. And through that, we're going to be using, data-driven for decision making, as well as putting a true focus on the users and ensuring that we are compliance forward at all times. And so, with that said, Sam, 20 years in the business, helping organizations, what does risk-based cybersecurity really mean to you?
Yeah, for me, risk-based is kind of a fundamental thing that I think is often forgotten in security, because I think risk management is the ground floor of cybersecurity and of all security, really. Let's be honest. Because if you're not risk informed, if you're not risk based, then you're just kind of shooting in the dark, and maybe that's what they did in the old days when they built castles. Maybe they were just building up the biggest walls, the highest towers they could. I don't know. But to be risk based in this day and age, and for me personally, coming from kind of the fractional CISO background, risk based means plan for the worst, hope for the best. And so, if you begin with the premise that we're going to prioritize and do the things that are most impactful to the organization, to the security of our organization, to the health and safety of our human assets and the organization as a whole. That means it's going to have to be data informed. It's going to have to be enumerated. So you probably heard the old analogy. You got to protect the crown jewels. And what I would say is, do you have a data inventory? So thinking about it from that perspective, if you have a data inventory, that's great. But what about the most important of those assets? For example, if you had to choose which ones were more important than others, if you had to assign criticality, could you do so today? Do you know what their value is? Have you gone through that risk management effort of actually articulating and quantifying and qualifying the numerical value to those things, the U.S. dollar value, the whatever the impact might be? So start with that data inventory, move up to a hardware and a software inventory. If you don't have those things, forget compliance. You're not protecting yourself. There's no way you are, because if you don't know what you're trying to protect, there's no way that you can devise a security program around that. So that's kind of, for me, that's where it comes down to documenting, to having the right topologies on hand, to understanding the network as a whole, understanding the use cases. And again, John, you mentioned the work from home. That's a now a cliche since 2020, right? That so many of us are working from home. But I think that's that's something that a lot of folks miss the boat on, in my opinion. And even when they think that they're protecting the organization, that's why we're having this conversation. They're protecting the castle, and they forgot that the princess and the king and the queen are outside the castle half the time, and they're not devising strategies to protect them. So making sure that we enumerate the use cases, we enumerate the environment, the inventories, the software list, et cetera, and that we assign risk appropriate to what the value of that thing is to our organization. That's, to me, what risk-based cybersecurity is. How about you?
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. When I think about risk-based cybersecurity, it really comes down to being able to prioritize. It comes down to being able to support decision making and being cost effective, making decisions for the business that support our budgets, and really allow us to target our real exposure, right? So ultimately, risk-based cybersecurity is really focused on identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risk to an organization's most critical assets based on the potential impact of the likelihood of any threat to that matter, which even goes beyond cybersecurity, right? Like think about what is the potential risk and impact to your business if there is some form of a natural disaster, and ultimately, are you prepared for that? Right, that is a true risk. I live out here
Mhm.
in Arizona. I, the risk of a tornado being here, I don't really have to prepare for that. You won't see me doing tabletop exercises based on what if a tornado hit our business. Those aren't things I have to think about. However, if we go out to Oklahoma, Arkansas, absolutely, when we do tabletop exercises and we start doing business impact analysis and understanding the risk to the specific business or the specific business unit, those are topics that actually come up. So to kind of cap that a little bit, I guess this really the risk-based approach is really to align with true business objectives as well, right? This ensures that cybersecurity strategies are aligned with the organization's overall business objectives and risk appetite, ensuring, like I mentioned earlier, that the security investment supports the broader business goals and decision making. I guess really quick, in practice, Sam, like what are some of those things that support a risk-based cybersecurity strategy. I'm thinking of like, continued risk assessments or even
Mhm.
business impact analysis.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do a lot of stuff. For example, defense contracting, we do everything from property management and legal firms, things like that. But for me, I think defense contracting, I think about, safeguards such as, having a risk register and going through that regularly. For example, if you're looking for CMMC certification, one of the things that's often overlooked in that entire conversation and just, a lot of folks say, oh, I'm going to check the boxes with 171. It's really not how it works. There's a lot of implicit or explicit tasks that kind of come along the way. And that really is risk management. Taking the time to have some regular conversation around the things that are happening in the organization, making sure you've got the right channels for people to pass risk up to the top, and of course, for it to flow down to users as well. Giving people the opportunity to voice concerns about things they see in the organization or, potential liability and risk, and then putting those on a risk register. I think that's a super easy first step. So, if you're looking for a takeaway, if you don't have a risk register, you should probably get one stat, right? And then
Yep.
and then using the data that's out there. I mean, I think maybe you can talk about, being data informed. For me, once I've got that risk register, now I'm going to go prioritize it. Well, how am I going to prioritize it? Well, I'm going to ask myself the question, in my market, in my geography, in my industry, in my whatever it is that I do, are there any statistics? Is there any data that can help me to prioritize that risk? And so, you know, that's kind of where I'm at. John, what do you think about the next step of taking the data and
Uh,
applying it?
well, I think there's data-driven risk prioritization, and then there's risk-based prioritization based on data, and so they really do go hand in hand. To me, data-driven cybersecurity is going to involve being able to use analytics, machine learning, AI,
Mhm.
to help detect and respond to threats in real time. Ultimately, this is allowing us to leverage data and analytics from various sources, whether it's from your internal environment and knowing what's going on in your environment, but also external sources and using threat intelligence and things like that. Um, so kind of going back to the castle a little bit here, instead of relying, solely on static defenses and
Mm.
rule-based monitoring, we need cybersecurity that adapts dynamically to emergent threats based on the continuously analyzing of data patterns, whether it's externally or internally. Um, and I think ultimately, this approach allows us to focus on the real-time insights again, the real-time data collection and analysis to provide into actionable intelligence to again go back to what's important to me and enable us to make better decisions overall for the business from a cybersecurity standpoint.
An example that comes
It,
to mind for me, like obviously we're talking about castles here. So, think about the folks you already let in the walls who you think are safe and they've been there for a long time, prioritizing risk and thinking about the data. If you're not collecting the data, then you've got nothing to digest. You've got nothing to analyze, right? So one of my, I guess, piece of advice, for those listening or watching, I think about the need for us to, as we create layered security approaches, to monitor everything that we can get our hands on and to collect as much data as we can. You don't have to chew it up yourself. You don't have to be the one who analyzes it, but if you've got the data, you can put that through some other kind of engine. You can drive that to your SIEM. You can put that in your SOAR. I think that's my advice is try to collect as much as you can. And often I've seen, like John, I can tell you so many examples where I've had organizations who are just rock solid, like rock solid in terms of perimeter and protecting the endpoint, even for the work at home and the hybrid. But you know what they don't do? They have no collection mechanism, and they're not looking for things that are already in the network, already on the system. So for example, insider threat, right?
yeah.
Like what kind of data are you collecting to devise a strategy to prevent that? And so just turning on certain logs, just enabling certain things can go a long way. Another example that comes to mind, I think we had talked about this a while back, is Often you see this is a really simple one, of course. Often you see firewall rules that are for ingress only,
Yep.
and I'm a big fan of actually ingress and egress, because how else would you see like a command and control, or how else would you see some kind of compromise in the environment if you didn't turn on that egress traffic, right? So the ingress is great. Everybody's got that. Everybody's blocking Afghanistan and China or whatever. But what about the outbound traffic? Are you also monitoring that to see if there's any potential for, again, command and control or insider threat, exfiltration? So the more data we can collect, the better. Yeah, I don't know,
I
what else,
couldn't
what else you might add there?
No, couldn't agree more. I think in practice, it's really first off, it's about visibility, right? It's like to your point, if you aren't collecting the logs, if you don't get the data into a centralized point, you lack the visibility. And so,
Mhm.
just thinking of like an easy one here, because I heard you call it the audit logs. Um, know who's in for insider threats, know who's accessing your files, know who's accessing the servers. And it's actually a very simple policy that you can enable through GPO that
Mhm.
allows a system to capture that type of information through the event logs. And so I think in practice, it's comprehensive visibility, having a system in place that can help capture that data and normalize it. It's continuous monitoring and analyzing that data, and then lastly, it's getting the behavioral analytics, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that probably ties right into one of the next main focuses for us, which is making this user-focused cybersecurity.
Before we go off of data, I wanted to share, one of the things that I really like about the approach that ArmorPoint, not to toot your horn, but the approach that you guys have, and one of the reasons why we really appreciate the partnership is an insistence that we put something in the network on the premise, and that's again that's that east-west traffic that we were kind of alluding to. So kudos on that design requirement there. And then the last thing that I just wanted to share was, I'm a data nerd, and I think finding folks who read those reports on your behalf and can give you good intel, or finding those reports and keeping up with those things, that's another source of good data. And just to be data driven as a cybersecurity program, if you can't tell me, for example, as an organization from the security program high level, if you can't tell me what your top three, top five uh, threats are looking like, if you can't threat model for me, for example, if you can't tell me we would expect this pattern, or we would expect these threat actors, or we would expect these scenarios of attack. If you can't answer that question for me, then that tells me you're not really aware, and you're not really informed what statistically, or what the data is telling you should be worried about. So, not to challenge anybody or put anybody in the hot seat, but go read the DBIR, go read the IBM State of the Breach, go read whatever documentation you might want to read, but inform yourself, and keep yourself up to date with those things, and consider threat modeling. That's an understated value add that I've always pushed on for my clients when I was a fractional CISO. I thought that was just a tremendous asset to an organization, to have that and to update that regularly, that threat model. So anyway, um, yeah, we're going to move on to user focused. So John, do you want to kick this one off, or would you like me
Sure.
to start?
No, sure. I happily kick it off. I think this is a critical piece, and one of the main reasons why we want to talk about this is because like we talked about at the beginning, that our users are no longer sitting in the castle. They are exposed. They are out in their houses. They are out and about. They're sitting at Starbucks. What could happen to the machine? I'm sitting at home right now. If somebody broke into my house and stole my laptop here, what could happen? What could be exposed, right? And so to me, it's a user focused cybersecurity is really an approach um, that places the user at the center of cybersecurity strategies. Recognizing that human behavior is often a weakest link in cybersecurity chain. Unlike traditional cybersecurity that mainly focus on the technology and the infrastructure. User-focused cybersecurity would more or less emphasize securing the human elements by addressing user behavior,
Mhm.
training, awareness,
Mhm.
and then obviously technology on top of that, right? So going back to my use case there, if somebody did break into my house, stole my machine, what type of protection is on that machine to ensure that I can rather encrypt it, I can track it, and making
Mhm.
sure that nobody could get something out of that machine just by stealing it. And that's a huge risk. Sam, love to hear your thoughts on this too, on
Well,
where you want to go with that. Yeah,
I mean, thinking about the people, like, I mean, if your machine's stolen, hopefully you are disk encrypted, right? And but I
hopefully.
have this conversation so often with folks, and it's astounding how we could miss it. And I think when I think user focused, I think this. I think I think the personal device, the BYOD. If you don't have a BYOD strategy, and you are not doing anything to prevent checking email, for example, on a standard mail client on a device. Um, I've seen many times where the default on an iOS is to back up mail to the iCloud or whatever. Well, guess what you just did? You just literally created a backup of all the secure company email or whatever that you were checking on that phone to your personal iCloud. So user focus to me means kind of a targeted, thoughtful, uh, well thought out, and tested security program that puts humans in the middle, puts human tendencies and behaviors kind of in the front and center. And so, how do you measure those threats? How do you test those threats? Well, obviously, we have pen testing that we can do, regularly. I think the training and awareness that you mentioned already is kind of a given. Now, let's be clear. Let's be honest. Let's have a tough conversation here. Do sometimes those security awareness training and the phishing simulation, do those sometimes fall on deaf ears? Do we know statistically if that actually improves the behavior of our users or has any measurable impact to the program? Those are tough conversations to have. But the bottom line is, it's like Drucker says, and I think I put the quote early on in the presentation. If you can't measure it, then you sure as heck can't fix it, right? So I think Drucker says that can be measured can be improved. Well, apply that to security. So if you're not measuring things, if you don't have a security awareness program that allows you to measure security awareness performance or phishing simulation performance, you can't even begin to scratch the surface. Now, could you argue that just because you have a 2% click rate that your users are safe? Not necessarily, but I think it's a good indicator. It's one of many things that can be a good indicator for sure. I think the big one for me is just that kind of that second line there, which is making sure that when you're designing and architecting these systems and programs, that you're keeping the human at the center and that you're protecting the person, the identity, no matter where they go, right? So, whether that's conditional access policies, whether that's a SIEM with automation that can disable accounts when they're seen traveling in impossible locations, things like that. Those are all human focused to me. So, what's next for us, John?
I think from here, I mean, tying this all together, I think it really is about just compliance forward. And so the my favorite part of compliance forward cybersecurity is actually that bottom check mark there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Having an actual program and not just checking a box. I, what the back end of what ArmorPoint does, it is a SIM solution. We're tying a lot together. We're building cybersecurity programs with DialPath, but a lot of cases where we talk to IT leaders, they're looking at their compliance and they're going, well, what check boxes can you help me meet, right? And
Mm,
that's just the wrong approach, in my opinion.
yeah.
So compliance forward cybersecurity is really an approach that integrates your regulatory compliance requirements into the core of an organization's cybersecurity strategy, not the other way around. This ensures that sure your cybersecurity practices are not only going to meet the legal obligations, but you're also going to enhance their overall cybersecurity. it's a little mind blowing for me that when we get the opposite, right? And Sam, I'm sure you
Yeah.
have had plenty of those conversations.
Yeah, yeah. Specializing in compliance for quite some
Mm,
time. That was exactly what people were looking for. They said, how do we satisfy this control? And so for me, it was always stressing the line that this is this is the bare minimum, right? Like we're not we don't want to be the bare minimum.
mm,
We want to be secure. We want to
mm,
meet the business goals. We want to protect our users. We want to keep people safe. And so, if there's controls to satisfy along the way and artifacts to collect along the way, that's great. But I think if we put that in there, let's have a comprehensive program that meets everybody's needs and that really does keep us safe. And if you do it right, more likely than not, you're gonna satisfy all those controls anyway. But I think talking about the things that get missed in this compliance former focused cybersecurity, I think people often forget about that third-party vendor risk management, and I'll take it a step further. I'll say nth party. So forget third party, nth party, because if you recall some of the breaches that have happened just so far this year in 2024, thinking through some of the things that may have impacted us all, we have examples where there's a supply chain attack or a compromise that are kind of downstream and that impacts those folks upstream. And so your client might be company X, but company X uses company Y for firewall and company Y uses X for whatever. So knowing about those risks to your supply chain and understanding third-party vendor risk management may actually go a little bit deeper into that kind of nth party is something to keep kind of in the forefront as well. But uh, John, tell me, because you guys have extensive footprint across the nation here. Tell me, what's your approach? How would you like to, if you could just make it all build the castle back how you might want it? What does that look like? How would you protect businesses today?
mm. Well, I take a couple approaches. One, obviously, kind of going back to the original statement, it really is let's understand the risk overall and what
Mhm.
that means to the business and how each business unit could actually impact the business. But ultimately, this does come back down to, having a 24/7, 365 monitoring. This does come back to having, firewalls in place. If you're in the cloud, having ensuring that we have, cloud access security, as well as, cloud CS PM, cloud security posture management, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it really is about having those defenses in place, the IDS, the IPS, ensuring that our users are connecting back through VPNs. And so it does come back to the foundation, but
Yeah.
of our standard approach of protecting a business with cybersecurity layers. However, we know it just goes so much deeper than that, right? And I think, Sam, that's where, you know, we talk about the castle here, but ultimately the princess is leaving the castle. How are you gonna protect the princess?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So this is a good Mario analogy. So yeah, with the princess leaving the castle, you've got to think about tailored and purposeful training and awareness programs. You've got to think about setting clear expectations. What does your policy library look like? When's the last time your AUP was updated? When's the last time your employee handbook was updated about work from home policies and hybrid work policies and how we use the technology? How do you protect the home network? I mean, we're sending all these devices out into the world, right? And these users are working, like you said, from Starbucks or whatever, from the airport. And if we're not instructing them, if we're not teaching them, if we're not setting expectations, you know, uh, folks don't know about those risks. They just don't know. It's our responsibility as security and IT professionals to make sure that we set those clear expectations and then we incentivize and award good behavior. We make sure that we encourage that good behavior. I'll share a quick story. If she watches this, I hope she does. I had a client in a past life a property management firm, and they had a security awareness program that included some phishing simulation and user awareness training, et cetera. And what they did, John, is it was like silly simple. It was actually Starbucks. They had a $50 gift card to the most improved score every quarter in that platform, and you wouldn't believe the impact that that had. You talk
Oh
about
yeah.
a good return on investment, right? Like people were, they were completing all the micro trainings. They were just really educating themselves for something very small. So yeah, for me to summarize, it's, it's having a rock solid MDR, XDR kind of solution. It's about password management, having good passwords, but managing them. Email filtering is a must, obviously. Vulnerability management, that means not just scanning and identifying that there's a risk or a vulnerable application on a device or a poor configuration on a device, but actioning that and making sure that it's taken all the way to the end to remediation. So that's me for protecting the princess, as it were. But what would you do about the crown jewels, or the crown in this case?
Well, really quick, I just got to make a joke here, but I feel like if Princess had watched this webinar prior to leaving the castle, Mario would have never had to save her from Bowser.
That's probably true.
But but no, going into the data itself, right? And this is what these bad guys are after. It really is about having the layers again, but it's at each step, right? Having layers at the castle, having layers at the user, and then having layers at the data, which is ultimately what these bad guys are after. And it really is ensuring, okay, do I have file encryption? Do I have, DLP solutions in place that
Mhm.
can track and see, what is leaving that environment? This is definitely where an easy one, file integrity monitoring, comes into play.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most important, in my opinion, is having immutable backups, right? Um, that is critical. What you never want to get to a point. I personally have sat through, man, way too many incident response
Yeah.
engagements, and
Yeah.
a lot of times what I see is, these bad actors, they were not only able to get in and take the data, but they also were able to get their backups. And in some cases, I've seen it where, actually they didn't reach the backups, but what ends up happening is, they say, hey, we're going to leak your data if you don't pay us. Right. So that's where the encryption piece comes into play. That's how where they have an additional layers come into play. But if you don't have these, immutable backups, it is very, very tough to recover from ransomware. I personally have sat through it way too many
Mhm.
times. And Sam, I'm sure you
Well,
have too.
we didn't plan this in advance or think about this, but maybe we should just take a moment to kind of unpack what's the MO, what's the modus operandi for ransomware gangs today, because that's probably very relevant to this conversation right now. Because that's perhaps, I think, actually, according to most of the statistics that I've read, and most of the white papers that I've read, it's pretty much across the board. It's within the top three concerns on every market, any industry worldwide. And it's certainly growing leaps and bounds. I think 2023 was, again, a massive, massive redoubling of ransomware attacks. But here's the MO for anybody who's not familiar. Um, once a threat actor has access to your systems, to your network, to your data, the MO is identify your backups, find where you have backups. They're going to exfiltrate the data. So they're going to get access. They're going to escalate their privileges. They're going to exfiltrate your data. They're going to destroy all your backups after they've exfiltrated, and then they're going to encrypt systems. And then what's going to happen is they're going to send the note. The note's found, whatever. Let's say you pay the ransom or you don't pay the ransom. You decide to say just the heck with it, or maybe you have cyber insurance that kind of gives you the advantage to have the ransom paid, whatever the case may be. They're going to come back in, kind of what you alluded to, and they're going to double extort, which is very much the norm today. They're going to double extort, and they're going to say, hey, we exfiltrated all your data before we trashed all your systems, and now we're going to ask you to pay again. Or if you didn't pay the first time, they're gonna put you over the barrel that next time around. So what can you do about that? Let's really connect the dots, I guess, John. For me, the file level encryption, this is an interesting one. I don't see this too often. I don't know about you, John, but I very rarely see this one. But if file level encryption, imagine if file level encryption could curtail that exfiltration effort. And so any exfiltrated data would essentially be worthless, right? That's just junk. So thinking about that attack plan from modern ransomware gangs, if your files are encrypted, even if they've got the files, they're worthless, right? File integrity monitoring is going to tell you, hopefully give you canary files or just give you the logs that are necessary to see those things happening, like encryption if it's ransomware. Um, Barring double encryption, things like that, you still could be in trouble, right? Your data could still be destroyed or your data could still be double encrypted. So that's where the immutable backups come in. Now, what we just described in plain language, I didn't count the layers of security, but you think about it that way, it's no longer about just choosing one of these five little balls here. It's about deciding what your risk tolerance is and creating a layered security approach that is commiserate or reflects the value of that crown, the value of that specific data, the value of that critical information. And if you haven't protected it adequately with all the layers that we just described, you could be at risk. Now, we're not telling you to go buy everything and put all the controls on, but you need to have that conversation. You have to decide that for yourself. Think through that, as a team, bring in experts, but devise a strategy that really does protect those crown jewels. And of course, the DLP, we can't leave that out. The bottom line for that DLP is insider threat, right? We hate to talk about that because we want to trust our employees. We want to have an open environment like that, but role-based access control for least privilege and DLP to know when somebody's taken things they shouldn't or move things they shouldn't, that's critical in this day and age. John, you want to maybe try to summarize some of these ideas for us here?
I really think that was beautifully said by you. I mean, it really is about understanding your risk tolerance at the end of the day and understanding, what is the most important and what is really the value of that to the business and what is the impact.
Mhm.
But ultimately, to summarize these all together, it's about, the type of business that you guys have and where the data ultimately lives. And so it really does come down to understanding, the core business. What does that look like? What is the
Mhm.
risk to the business? Ensuring we have the perimeter layers, understanding, what is the risk to each employee and what could that employee, if compromised, mean for the business. But ultimately comes back to, the data itself and what you're ultimately trying to protect.
I think for me, it's not a destination. We're not trying to rebuild the castle. It's a journey. That's the idea. Like that's the idea. Let's tear down the castle because we're not trying to update the castle. We're never going to be able to build a castle in modern terminology. Let's just tear the castle down, right? It's a journey. You're never going to be safe enough. You're never going to be able to pay enough money to protect yourself from everything. You're never going to find a provider who can lock you down everywhere all the time because your users are always going to be a risk. Clicking on a link is always going to be a risk. Losing a computer is always going to be a risk. There's always going to be a risk. And so the only thing you can do is prepare as best you can, determine what your risk profile is, create a threat model if you like, create a risk register, keep track of those things that are risks to you, and then make sure that you've done a really good job and you've been really thorough about going through all of your assets, all of your environment to apply those basic security concepts to each one of those systems, each one of those users, et cetera. So again, cybersecurity is not a destination. It's a journey. What do you think, John?
Yeah, 100%. And it really just comes back to, developing a strategy that aligns with that,
Hmm. Hmm.
that is also continuously assessing the risk to the business, implementing protective measures, and continuously evolving over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we touched on AI just briefly here and there, but I think it goes without saying that's a whole nother webinar in and of itself is the additional risk that comes from AI infused threat actors and AI infused protectors. Like we're the good guys, right? John and I are the good guys. We're here to protect you, and we're using AI as best we can to protect our customers, our team, our family members, our communities. But the fact is the human brain is always able to find a way around. It's always able to find a path through, and that's the definition of a hacker, whether it's good or bad. And when you add in AI to that scenario, it just, man, it takes it up another notch. And we're ready for anything, John, but man, we're always kind of on our back foot sometimes, seeing the new threats out there. It's like, holy smoke. So again, protect
Yeah.
everything you can, get all the data you can, be as vigilant as you can, but understand that it's got to be a work in progress. If you're not partnered with somebody, if you don't have a team that's able to change and is very agile when it comes to this kind of cybersecurity program, then you're probably going to need to look somewhere else, in my opinion. So should we stop there for questions, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a perfect stopping point.
Anybody has any questions you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and drop them in. I think we have a Q&A open here. Let's see. Don't see a question yet. One question that I've heard often, John, I don't know if you want to maybe try to field this one, is
Sure.
what in what ways are we, I think, probably speaking for us in a singular, how are we leveraging AI? That's a good place to kind of jump off, to better protect our clients. Maybe
Yep.
is a good question.
Yep. And so I think it really comes down to having, first off, what we do to help protect our clients is we have a platform, a security operations platform that is leveraging AI and machine learning to help us detect threats faster and closer to real time, and also taking that information, correlating it together to provide us with actionable intelligence so that way we can, going back to what I was talking about earlier, make better decisions and provide a better response. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the many ways that we're starting to, or we've been leveraging AI, but we're continuously evolving that as well to better protect our clients against AI as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anything you want to add to that, Sam?
No, I think you know, for me personally, it's all about automation. Like, if we can, my goal is to get the number as close to zero as possible when we're talking about mean time to remediate, mean time to resolve. So if there's an incident and we know, like, going back, kind of, this is like a refresher, right? Like, let's summarize, right? So thinking about all the things we talked about, we know it's no secret. We know exactly what's going to happen to our customers. We know who they are. We know how they do it. We know what to look for. We know the indicators, and we're just ready to pounce, right? So when we see those things happening, my goal is to get that number as close to zero as possible. So if we know, when this happens, do this, and then we're remediated, we're good to go, put it back into production, et cetera. If we can take that and we can automate that, and that's where I think AI really comes in handy. If we can automate that process, I think that's the sweet spot. That's where we really want to be, so that's the future, I guess, for us. I think if there's
Yeah.
no other questions, yeah, I really just wanted to say I appreciate everybody's time, and thank you so much for joining us. And if you're watching this recording, or if you have any follow-ups, please do let us know. You can reach out on any platform you like, social media, or you can drop us a note at any time. We look forward to hearing from you. Anything you want to say in closing, John?
No, I really appreciate the time and just wanted to echo Sam in saying that if there's any questions that come up after the fact or anything at all, please feel free to don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Alrighty. Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. Bye bye.